I'm Alex.
And I'm Shane.
And this is the RPM podcast.
And welcome back to another podcast. Today we're going to do a RPM Roundup, and we're going to be talking about the provisional 2021 calendar. We're going to go step by step with each track, give you our views and opinions on them, whether we like them, whether we've missed them this year, whether we haven't missed them, any surprises coming up. And we're going to discuss the overall implications of having such a long race calendar, because next year is 23 races confirmed provisionally at the moment, set to be one of the longest calendars in F1 history. So we're going to go straight into it with Australia, something we missed out on this year, unfortunately. I quite like that track myself. But Australia is the first race next year. It was always going to be. I think they've signed another 5. I think they've got a 5-year contract, actually. I think they signed that last year. So they're set till 2025. It kicks off the year. How do you feel about that, Alex? How does Australia tickle you?
Yeah, I like the circuit. It's very familiar to come back to it at the start of a calendar. It's like stepping into an old pair of slippers, isn't it? It's like coming home.
It's warm
to what you expect. It's welcoming. It's 21st of March is when we'll see that. Like you say, we missed it this year. Bit of a farce. Everyone showing up, and then moments before we're about to get a green light, they shut the whole thing down. So that's a shame. Hopefully we'll be able to go back to Australia. COVID aside, I understand Australia is doing pretty well on that front. So hopefully we'll be back at Albert Park on the 21st of March.
Yeah, I pretty much like the circuit. Like you said, it's a good one to start the season off with, and it's an early one as well. So I get a little bit excited being here in the UK. It's like F1's back. Got to get up a little bit early to watch the first race of the year. Will it be a good one? Well, whatever it is always going to be a good one because it's the first race of the year. And usually reliability, throws up such a massive curveball in the first race. I remember a couple of years ago when Haas F1 first joined, the calendar or the teams, they had great reliability for the first race, and not many other teams did. So they scored some decent points, probably joint one of their best finishes. So that's why I look forward to the first race of the season. I'm glad to see it's at Melbourne.
A week later, we end up in Bahrain. This is going to be at the usual Sakir, not going anywhere different. I really like this track. I'm particularly good at it on the F1 game. I don't really know why, but I just quite like it. It flows rather nicely. It's nice to have a track that's one of these Tilke style tracks out in the desert, but also has a lot of elevation changes to it and has been built a little bit more like a track that you might expect, which is similar to why we like the Istanbul Park circuit, is that it kind of feels like, has a slightly old school vibe to it in the way that it undulates quite a lot. And you kind of go all the way to the top elevation wise at one end of the track and then come all the way back down again. I rather like that about it because it creates more challenge for the drivers and changes the grip levels throughout, and it's not just boring to look at.
I think what adds to the track as well is it's a night race, and I really enjoy seeing cars go around in the dark. Especially we've got you've got the driver cameras now, where the camera's pointing at the driver's crash helmet in the dark. Obviously, they don't need any sun visors or tinted visors for their crash helmet, so we get to see the look in their eyes. I think there's a classic shot of Hamilton driving around in the dark. I don't know if it was in Dubai or whether it was in Singapore, but his eyes were so wide, and it was just the concentration on the guy's face, and you can only experience that kind of camera view and really appreciate it in a night circuit. But I completely agree with you. It's a really nice track. I quite like it on the F1 game as well. I think we're quite competitive at it. It's one of both our favourite tracks, and I quite happily have it stay. It's been in Formula 1 for a long time as well. It's adapted over the years. We've obviously had the shorter circuit. We're experiencing the outer circuit later on this year, which is going to be interesting. It's going to be fast. But I quite like it. Like you said, it's a good character. It's a really nice feeling track.
The 11th of April, we go on to China. So standard Shanghai circuit. Don't really dislike this track, but I don't really like it that much either.
It's not one I look forward to be honest.
No, I mean, it's... I understand it makes perfect sense to have a Chinese Grand Prix because it's, as far as F1 are concerned, it's a huge market for the sport. So it makes perfect sense. And it's not like it's some new race. The Chinese Grand Prix has been there a long time.
Was it the 1000th Grand Prix? Did that host the 1000th Grand Prix, the 1000th race?
believe so, yeah.
It was a little bit underwhelming, that one. I remember it. That's what I remember China being like. Because obviously we didn't visit it this year for obvious reasons. But I think it was last year was the 1000th race. And it was a little bit underwhelming. It's not a track I like driving on the Formula One game either. It just doesn't flow. And for such a purpose-built track, there's not too many overtaking opportunities as well. For the modern era of F1, that may change going forward into 2022, but just not one of my favorite tracks. It just doesn't really throw up much of a race, to be honest, unless it rains.
It just has that epic, really wide straight.
Yeah, huge
really long straight into a super tight corner. Into a hairpin, basically, which is what we've come to expect from a lot of the modern tracks. Let's have a ridiculously long straight into a hairpin.
With a heavy braking zone, and that'll give us some overtaking. But the overtaking has been done halfway down the straight. DRS is so powerful. It's
so powerful that everyone gets past before they're even near the braking zone. So
they just need to change it every year, like move it forward, or end the DRS just at the right point. So the DRS isn't making the overtake; it's just getting the car aside for the overtake. But let's not get into what we can do to improve F1. So on the 25th of April.
Then we've got like this gap, haven't we, on the 25th? It's what was going to be the Vietnamese Grand Prix, but the BBC reported that a key figure in bringing the race to the country, the Hanoi People Committee chairman Nguyen Duc Chung, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, was arrested in August of this year for alleged appropriation of documents containing state secrets, so something unrelated to F1 as I understand it. But these are local issues that have been cited as the reason for the collapse of the Grand Prix itself. I am thinking that much like the Indian Grand Prix, we may not actually ever see a race in Hanoi ever.
That's a shame.
We saw Indian, obviously the Indian Grand Prix was meant to come back and it didn't. I think in the case of Hanoi, we may never see a race there.
It's a shame. It was only built a couple of years ago, wasn't it? It was being built last year for this year, and I really like the look of it. And I don't want to go back to the game either. But there's so many banked corners, like that last corner going onto the straight. It looks incredible, and I would have loved to see F1 cars go around it. It's a shame that, like you said, that opportunity is probably not going to present itself.
When you say a banked corner, you're not thinking of Zandvoort, are you?
Oh, I think I am. Have I got them confused?
Hanoi is that the
street circuit?
Yeah, it's the street circuit where it's just lots of again, they've got a really long straight into the hairpin, and then there's obviously the danger of all the walls, and there's the skill element in that, but on the game, I guess it's a different beast on the game. I don't really enjoy it on that. I find it a little bit it's a bit oppressive, really, but without any of the... Well, I don't really like doing Monaco either.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I found it a bit uninspiring. It didn't really look like it produced good racing to me.
Okay, well, if that's the case, I got my tracks confused.
Zandvoort will have.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind not seeing this one then, because I didn't think it was going to produce very good racing anyway. It was very much like Monaco, just stretched out a little bit with a couple of longer straights. And I know you might get some overtakes on the straights, but that's all they will be. It's just overtakes on the straights and nothing through Sector 3, because that was just a couple of left right-handers, with tight walls. It was just not designed for this era of Formula One in mind. So I'll quite happily not see that track. So on the 25th, it says to be confirmed. What track would you like to see in there?
Well, I understand that that gap could be filled by a race at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami in the United States, where Formula One announced an agreement in principle in October 2019. Whether or not that will actually happen remains to be seen. We could have a second US race. Or it could be filled by one of the tracks that we saw this season. I know that Portimao and possibly the Nürburgring. Trying to think of the others that were possibly Istanbul Park Circuit as well are hoping to put themselves forward for that gap. It would be good to see something that we've seen this year fill that gap. Certainly, I'd like to see Istanbul Park Circuit back again next year. To be honest,
yeah, absolutely.
So, I think it was a great race. It's a great circuit. They've resurfaced it. It's clearly appropriate for the sport. I really hope that we can see it again.
They've put a lot of money into it, haven't they? They've put a lot of money into that track. It'd be a shame only to use it once in such a global spectacle. It needs to happen again.
Well, I mean, we also need to have more races that go across the rest of the world, because obviously the sport in general is very European centric, because that's where a lot of their teams are from and where they're based, and it kind of makes sense. But also we want to appeal across the rest of the world. There are fans of this sport worldwide. Like, why isn't there an African Grand Prix anymore, for example? But we should also be mindful of the problems encountered by other races where there was not enough domestic interest to fill a 100,000 capacity racetrack. It's kind of what happened to Sepang, is that Malaysian Grand Prix is such a good circuit. I love Sepang. One of the best modern circuits.
It really is. It just doesn't get the publicity. It doesn't get the
I don't know whether it's a problem with promotion or what, but like the every single year the numbers were going down, and it was a similar problem with the Indian Grand Prix. I understand that there may be problems with promotion, and maybe it's not being pushed in front of people in the right way. Maybe the tickets are just too expensive. There's a lot of factors, but it would be nice if more was done to fill that slot with somewhere where we might not normally see a race. At the very least, I would be happy to see the Turkish Grand Prix return.
Absolutely. I think that's something we can agree on. It needs to come back. It was such a good race, and it was before the race. I felt like the track had already warmed to me because of the issues we were having in qualifying and practice. The track surface being a little bit, being new, it threw up such a curveball to the drivers, and it's such a good track. I remember driving it back on Grid, Grid 1 when it came out for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. Such a fantastic circuit. It's a real shame this year that we didn't get to see that triple left-hander going full throttle. And if we keep on going back there, maybe we will see that in a couple of years' time. You never know. But that's the 25th of April. Nothing to be decided at the moment. But if you follow us on Twitter, you'll be sure to find out when the world does. 9th of May, Spain. Now, I'm going to start this if you don't mind. I don't think we should go to Spain because it's a test track. I really feel like the test track for the season should be different to any track you race at. I just don't feel like it should be the same track.
We touched on this in our episode about the calendar, didn't we?
Yes.
What we would do if we had control of the calendar. And it makes no sense to have a testing track on the calendar like that because of how predictable it's obviously going to be.
There's other tracks
still go
in
to Spain. So
yeah, there's other tracks in Spain. Either move those to being the testing tracks and keep Barcelona as the racetrack, or don't. I just don't have the same testing track as you would do for the racetrack. And if you're going to keep Spain, take out the last chicane. So you've got a really nice long flowing corner onto the back straight. That doesn't make it a really long straight. Actually, we've got some horrendously long straights on the calendar. The Spanish Grand Prix, that Barcelona circuit doesn't have a really long straight. It has a normal straight, but adding that final corner onto it would really promote some overtaking. That chicane kills any chance of overtaking going into turn 1, if you ask me. Apart from that, the track's pretty average in my opinion. It's all right. We've had a couple of good races there. Max got his first win there when the two Mercedes took each other out. That was an exciting race. It's an all right track. It's an average track in my opinion.
It strikes me as it's a circuit that if it weren't on the calendar and it were like Portimao or Imola, and that it was seen as being this old school track, then people would be quite excited to see it come onto the calendar again. But the amount of times that we've raced there now, not only has the luster for the track itself very much disappeared, what with it being a testing track, but like you say, the way that it's laid out is not optimized for the cars. I mean, there's an alternative turn after the flat. Oh God, I don't remember which number turn it is, but there's a sharp left-hander after the second DRS zone.
Yep.
And there's an alternative layout there as well. Yeah, maybe you could experiment with that, for example. Just try a different layout.
Put that into practice. Put that into the pre-season testing, and then also the track for the actual race. I just don't like the fact that it's similar, but I agree. These tracks have got multiple different layouts. They're all certified to the correct regulations. Why not change them a bit?
Then we go to Monaco then, 23rd of May.
Yep.
I mean, we've already said everything we need to say about how much we don't really like this track, and that it only really exists so that people can, all the rich people can have a party.
Saturday's more exciting than Sunday.
Yeah, just I could take it or leave it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I get the excitement, I get the history, I get the like you say, the excitement of Saturday, seeing the cars being pushed to the limits, but the race is boring, and it is always boring. Sometimes you might get a bit of rain that spices it up. Sometimes you get a 1994-esque moment of drama where somebody just happens to win from the back by keeping it tidy for 72 laps. Those moments are greatly outshadowed by the number of times that we see a procession.
Yeah, it's won or lost in the pit lane. There's rarely any on-track overtakes. If there is, that usually ends up in a bit of a disaster. Won or lost in the pit lane. We've seen Daniel Ricciardo lose it in the pit lane. We've seen Lewis Hamilton lose it in the pit lane. It's just, if a race can be won or lost by having an extra 2-second pit stop, by having a mishap in the pit stop, then I feel like the track isn't worth it. The driving needs to be done on track. You can't win or lose it in the pits. Pits are there to make the cars drive as efficient and as fast as they can for as long as they can. Give them the best opportunity to race, not to win a race with. But that's all I've got to say about Monaco. It's nice to look at on a beautiful day, the helicopter shots, and I'm sure everyone on their yacht really appreciates the race. And
I'd appreciate it too if I had a yacht.
Absolutely. You never know. 30, 40 years time, you never know. But no, I'm sure some drivers appreciate it as well. Minimal travel distance from your home to the race circuit.
Yeah, they just get to pop downstairs and have a little race.
I'm pretty sure they do free practice on a Thursday, don't they? Because they have a traditional party on a Friday, and then there's loads of alcohol on the track, or there's like debris and alcohol soaked into the track for the Saturday. That's why they do free practice on a Thursday. But yeah, it's an all right track. I don't really look forward to it. I don't look at the calendar and go, oh, next week's Monaco. I go, oh, maybe I'll watch qualifying. That's one for the highlights, that is, because it's a long old race as well, 72 laps. The drivers must find it like exhausting having to concentrate, because obviously they do have to concentrate through that circuit. It's very unforgiving. It's just exhausting to watch. It's definitely one I'll fall asleep through.
It's like it's kind of like the Formula One equivalent of like the work Christmas party or something. It's an indulgence that nobody really enjoys or looks forward to.
But you have to go.
You got to do it because I suppose we might as well do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on from Monaco, we've got another street circuit, Azerbaijan, Baku. I quite like this track. It's wide, it's fast, it's got some really good corners on it. The castle section is unbelievably narrow. As much as that's a spectacle for the track, I really think they should have chosen a different route, something a little bit wider, to just promote some on-track racing. But I quite like it. We've had some really good races there. It's been never really let us down.
Yeah, it does have another of those massive straights. Although
huge.
It's huge, but it's also augmented by a sort of interesting final sector. It does have that. It does have the need to get a good exit going into that last little bit to get the maximum possible speed going down there. So it's a little bit more interesting than just you turn out and then here's 2.5 kilometers or whatever until you get to the end.
Absolutely, and it's not like turn one is a nice curved corner where you can be on any side of the track and make that corner. If you make the overtake, you then have to probably go to the outside of the track to make turn one, because obviously it's a street circuit, it's a 90-degree left. So the overtaking has to be done, but they also have to get back in position to make that turn one. Obviously, we had a bit of a famous incident there with Max and Daniel trying to overtake each other, or I think Max was defending at this point and Daniel was behind attacking, and they collided going into, they didn't even make turn one, but that's the risk you take when you're trying to defend your position and go for it. It's a really interesting track. I quite like it, and I'm glad it's on the calendar.
It's funny because on paper, Baku has many of the things sort of quote unquote wrong with it that many of the other tracks that I dislike have.
Yes,
but like you say, it's never really let us down. It's always been a pretty good race. So yeah, I quite like it. I like it on the game as well. It's an interesting track, despite the fact that it has all these quirks of street circuits that means that it kind of shouldn't work, but somehow it does.
Yeah, it's got obviously sector one. Just talking about the track, it's got just that second long straight, the first DRS straight, is It's just long enough to potentially get a pass. It's not a slam dunk overtake move. You need a good exit and you need DRS, and you might just about get that move done, but you have to work for it. It's not an easy feat, which I think makes it interesting. It's not a slam dunk. You're definitely going to get this overtake every single time. Let me move on to Canada, one of my favorite tracks of the year, just because it's just historic. I love the track. I love driving it. It's fast. It's flowing. It's not got many corners, which is probably why I'm good at it. There's less mistakes to make. It's got the Wall of Champions. It's just got everything. I really enjoy the track. It's got long straights, fast corners, chicanes, and that last chicane with the Wall of Champions just makes it all the more fun.
Yeah, like you say, fast flowing track. It's exciting. It's always a good event. We've seen lots of classic races there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, always a good one. Not too much to say about it, really. Just always happy to go to Montreal. Cool track.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope it stays for years to come because it's suited for modern F1 cars. I don't know. Again, it's hard. If we had to design a circuit for modern F1 cars, we'd probably do it wrong. And that's what's happened over the years. People have thought it would work and it doesn't. But Canada just gets it right every single time. Moving on to one of my least favourite circuits of the year. And it's only been on the calendar for a couple of years now. France.
Yeah, this is the Circuit Paul Ricard.
Yep.
It's ugly to look at. It's boring to race. It's boring to watch. I understand it's also really difficult to get to.
Yeah, it's got like a road going to it.
Yeah. I don't understand the circuit. I don't know why it's on the calendar. Even Magny Core might be better, and that was a circuit that has a reputation for being kind of boring as well. So, I don't know. I just never seen anything exciting happen at this race. I remember last year it was just awful.
It was so bad, wasn't it? It was beyond a joke of how boring it was. I think everyone walked away from that race, or didn't walk away, but everyone stopped watching that race and thought, wow, that was 2 hours. I'm never going to get back. I learned nothing in that race whatsoever. And the only interesting thing about that track, it's got a terrible pit exit because it goes straight onto the racing line for turn one. Somewhat dangerous, but apart from that, I've got nothing else to say about Paul Ricard. I hope it gets removed off the calendar going forward because it's just an awful racetrack.
Then we go to Austria, which one of the tracks which was fortunate enough to get featured this year. We've seen a lot of Austrian racing this year because obviously we had it twice. But it's a great track. It's kind of similar to Canada in the sense that it's this fast flowing track with quite a few different challenges with both high and low speed corners, with a slightly more interesting straight than just having one big long line. It's all, got that kind of kink in it as you go towards the end of the DRS zone.
Yep.
I really like this track. It's good fun to drive as well on the game. It's kind of easy. I'd say it's probably one of the easiest tracks you can do on the game.
I couldn't agree more. It's nice, flowing. There's not too many heavy braking zones, which makes it a real joy to race. Obviously, you got turn one, but that's not really a heavy braking zone. That's you're clipping the apex, using all the curb and probably a little bit more to keep your momentum going through. Even the final corner, it's a 90-degree right, or it's probably a 100-degree right. But actually, it goes down a hill and then it kinks right, and you've just got to avoid that sausage curb in the middle. But you've got quite a wide straight to to keep the speed up. So I really enjoy it. You can get some proper fast lap times there. I'm glad we saw it twice this year because it threw up two good races. Obviously, we saw Lando on the podium on the first. Was it the first race of the season?
Yeah.
Oh, incredible stuff. Really like the circuit. I hope it's here to stay. Dubbed the Red Bull Ring, and I can see why, because the Red Bull has usually done quite well there. It's not very. Would you say it's a power dependent circuit? It's a short circuit, isn't it? It's got not many long straights, so it's power dependent in a sense that you need to keep up momentum and have good cornering, but you don't need max top speeds or anything.
No, it's not like Monza or anything where you have to maintain a constant speed in the same way. I think it's just that, like you say, it's a short circuit, which a lot of those shorter circuits do tend to be pretty exciting for racing because the cars will end up closer together. Whereas a track like Spa, for example, and this is another problem with Abu Dhabi, which we'll come to as well, is that it's just unnecessarily long. Is that you end up with a much greater field spread And whereas the shorter tracks like this, Canada, Interlagos, you end up with the cars much closer together. If there are incidences, then they bunch up a lot more. It's always given us good racing. We've had 2 good races this year, like you said. So yeah, great. Always happy to see Spielberg.
Absolutely. Moving on to another track, which we had 2 races on this year with the British Grand Prix. So, and then we had the 100th anniversary Grand Prix. Was it the 100th anniversary Silverstone Grand Prix? I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, it was
a
they just called it the
milestone,
anniversary Grand Prix.
Oh, it might have been the 70th anniversary. I can't remember what it was, but we had 2 races at Silverstone,
and that's 70th anniversary. Yeah.
Yep, and so that's the 18th of July, back to its usual position on the calendar, midsummer for us, 18th of July. I really like Silverstone. Again, it's a nice, fast flowing track. Not much elevation change, and I like to see elevation changes in the track, but actually Silverstone doesn't need it. It's got Maggots and Beckett's. It's got the final sector, the first. Every single sector works well, to be honest. It's a joy to race. It's a joy to watch. It's quite a fast circuit, and I just enjoy fast tracks. Really, really like Silverstone.
Yeah, Silverstone is a favourite amongst the drivers as well. There's just something about the way that the corners and complexes are designed that it flows beautifully, but is also incredibly challenging and requires you to get it absolutely right. You got like Cops and Maggots and Beckett's and just so many places where you have the ability to keep your foot in it, provided that you can stay on the right line to keep it together. It's quite an exciting track because of that. How can you not love Silverstone? It's just a great
It's a driver favourite and it's a fan favourite.
Yeah, and it's the British Grand Prix. I mean, I don't think it's particularly controversial to say that it does feel like the UK is kind of the spiritual home of Formula One in a lot of ways because it's where so many of the teams are based.
Yeah,
it's where a lot of the the sports operations are based as a result of the history of the sport, I suppose. And the sport in general is European centric, so
most of the teams are within 10 miles of Silverstone. Yeah. It's a nice, easy track to get to. Don't cost very much on logistics for the Silverstone weekend. It's just a quick drive down to the local track. Moving on to the 1st of August, Hungary, Budapest. What's your thoughts on this track, Alex? I'm interested.
Yeah, Hungary is... the Hungaroring's an interesting track in that it is extremely challenging. It's a very technical, it's not a power circuit by any means. We have seen some good races in the past here. I always remember Jenson Button's first win. But again, on paper, it kind of shouldn't work. It's very narrow. It's kind of an old school circuit, sorry. And it's not got lots of elevation changes. It's generally quite tight, not very easy to overtake. There's only the one DRS zone, which itself is not a very long straight. Doesn't seem like a recipe for great racing. I generally find it a bit forgettable on the calendar as a whole, but I also don't have a strong enough and negative opinion about it to necessarily want to see it gone. What do you think?
I completely agree. It doesn't stand out to be one of the best. It doesn't stand out to be one of the worst. It's just there. Would I miss it if it wasn't on the calendar? No, not at all, because it doesn't spring to mind of any like brilliant races we've had there over the last like 5-10 years. It's just there. I'm not a massive fan of the track. Like you said, it's quite narrow. It's very street circuit-esque, especially Sector 3. It is so narrow in Sector 3. It's like 4 or 5 meters wide. It's ridiculous. And how you're meant to get 2 cars side by side to promote any overtaking is ludicrous. But the track as a whole doesn't get much wider than that going into Sector 1 or, Sector 2. I do like the blind left-hander going into Sector 2. You go up a bit of a crest, got the left-hander. It's always a bit touch and go on the game, whether you're going to make it or not. I can't imagine what it's like doing it as an actual driver, that low down in a car. Must be terrifying. But that's the only part of the track I really enjoy. Apart from that, if I had the option to miss a race weekend a year, if I had to work one Sunday, it would definitely be that track.
Yeah, it's a race that has, as the cars have developed, because obviously Hungaroring's been on the calendar a very long time, it's one of those tracks that's not aged particularly well as the cars have developed.
No, not at all.
But I don't see them getting rid of it anytime soon, so I'm kind of not really that bothered by it. It's there, like you say. It's on the calendar.
Yeah, it's there. There's nothing much we can do about it. And then we've got a 3-week break. 4-week break, 28-day break. It's the is it the summer break? It is. It would be the 4 week.
It is, yeah.
It would be the summer break. And then it starts all over again on the 29th of August, and we start off in Belgium at Spa.
With a triple header as well.
Blimey, yeah, it's gonna be tough next year. We'll touch on that later on in the show, how tough it's gonna be on everyone. But yeah, the first of 3, Belgium Grand Prix. I quite like the track. It's a really long track. It's spread out so far, which always like throws some interesting scenarios with weather. Usually, if it's raining on, if there's a chance of rain, usually it's going to hit one part of the circuit before it hits the other part of the circuit. Now, where other tracks like Monaco, Austria are quite tightly packed, they're short tracks within, 1 square mile of each other, or they're all built within 1 square mile or 2 square miles. That Spa is so stretched out. It could be raining in one part of the track, snowing in another part, and be glorious sunshine in another part. I love the elevation changes going down Sector 1, going up Radion through Rouge. It's just, yeah, I really like the track. It's always, does it throw up some interesting races? Not all the time, but it doesn't have to. I just really like the track. I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
It's definitely a real challenge. There's so many different sections and complexes and corners, and it's got some similar to what we were saying about Silverstone, where there's places where you just have to keep your foot in it and be brave and throw yourself into that corner.
Absolutely,
there's
yeah.
obviously Eau Rouge and Radion, but there's also Pouhon as well.
Pouhon, just that left-hander. You got to put your foot down and hope for the best.
There's onboards when you watch it. There's that one of Hamilton from last year where it's just, it's kind of scary to look at, really. It's pretty incredible. So it's a big challenge for the drivers. I know that it's a driver favourite. We always get to see one of the most exciting things on the whole Formula One calendar, which is obviously lap 1 going into Sector 1. That's just one of the most exciting things on the whole calendar. So that alone is almost worth... Yeah, it's
turn 1 is incredible.
You've got turn 1, and then you've got Eau Rouge Radion, and then you've got the Kemmel Straight, which is really wide, and it's that alone is worth the price of admission. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, if you were going to sit anywhere, in that track, it would be down the Kemmel Straight. Just people coming up, Radion and Rouge, and going into that chicane. Yep, I would love to sit there. It's one of those tracks where if you qualify first, great job, you've put it on pole. But the chances of you leading after turn 3 are so small because you've got kilometers, well, probably not kilometers, but you've got like a kilometer straight. And it's just incredible. And it's a if you've got the nerve, if you've got the balls, you're going to do well going up, on lap 1. If you've got the nerve, you'll do well. If not, you're going to end up slipping back through the places, unfortunately. Good track. Really like it.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope it stays for a very long time.
So then the next one on the 5th of September, we will hopefully, this time, end up in the Netherlands, going to Zandvoort. Yeah, fingers crossed. So hopefully we'll get to see this circuit, which we didn't see this year for obvious reasons. This looks like an intriguing track in its design, but I'm not convinced that it's going to make for good racing. I want to see it. I want to see it first. I'll withhold judgment until we get there. I suppose I should have said the same thing for Hanoi, really. I mean, I don't think it's a huge loss, that track, but
no.
Again, I'm not really sure what to make of Zandvoort. If it were not to appear on the calendar, I don't know, it has some unique features to it because of the way that it's designed. It has that kind of weird camber throughout. There's lots of undulations, and it obviously has the banked corner at the end. At least there, it has something unique about it that you want to see, at least, in order to find out what the impact on the racing would be. It's so narrow, though. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it will work for a race, but hopefully this time we'll get to see and find out.
Hopefully so. I got this track confused with, Hanoi back at the start of this podcast, but I really like this track. I like the design of the track. Like you said, it's got undulations, it's got bank corners, it's got elevation changes, and not just that it goes up and down. It goes up and down like 3 or 4 times throughout the whole circuit. So it feels
like a roller coaster.
Yeah, it feels like it's going to be an incredible spectacle to watch a Formula One car going around. Whether it produces a good race or not. I agree with Alex. It might not be the best racetrack due to the nature of how wide it is. It's just it might not produce a brilliant race, but I'm looking forward to watching it. It's a new track, and like this year, I've liked seeing cars return to old tracks, treating them like new tracks, and seeing how they handle and what they're capable of. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the Formula One car can do at the end of the hybrid. At the end of this era, where the cars are at their best and capability, and see how they handle that track. Also begs the question, turn. Well, I don't know what turn it is, but that last turn, that banked corner, if it's pouring down, given that we've just watched Turkey and it rained, and the lack of traction, the lack of grip because of the rain and the newly surfaced track, I don't know how much running Zandvoort has had since it's been built. I can't imagine a great deal due to due to COVID. But if it starts raining at that track, are we going to have the exact same issues of what we had with Turkey, but almost worse, because this corner is so banked. I can't remember what the degree level on it was, but when you drive on the Formula One game, it feels ridiculous.
At least there won't be any standing water.
Exactly. You're not wrong, actually.
Nowhere for it to sit. It's almost nowhere flat on the whole thing.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but it looks like an interesting track, and we'll find out hopefully next year.
And if we have full crowds, the atmosphere will be good as well.
It's just gonna be orange. It's
that orange army
everywhere.
Comes, when on the normal sort of circuits, it'll be something pretty special as it is. So when we actually go to the Netherlands, I'm sure it will be riotous in the best possible way.
Absolutely. I don't want to compare it with Silverstone, but it will rival the British fans, and it will rival the likes of Monza as well, with the amount of fans going to that track. It will just be a sea of orange amongst the lush green of the scenery. I really hope it happens, and we get fans there as well. Speaking
of Monza, that is next.
That's
12th
next.
of September. How can we not have the Temple of Speed on the calendar?
Exactly.
It's unthinkable. This is. I know that maybe this isn't some people's favorite track. I guess it is just the ultimate power circuit. You just stick your foot down for most of it.
It's ridiculous. It's 90% full throttle.
The average speed is something ridiculous, like 274 kilometers an hour or something, which is just nutty. But I always enjoy this circuit. I think you like to see the cars going at full pelt. We always get to see the dinner tray rear wings. And I think it always produces some pretty good races. I mean, last year was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it. This year was obviously absolutely historic, incredible race.
It was mad.
Yeah, this is a great circuit. It's good fun.
Yep. I won't repeat what you said. I completely agree. But I also like the fact that it's got some old school runoffs. It's got the gravel traps, so people can't just run wide or cut corners if they've made a mishap. They'll be penalised for it. Exactly. You got to stick to the black stuff. If not, you're going to be in trouble. And we've seen that at other circuits this year. At Turkey, there's some deep gravel traps there into not turn one, but I can't remember what turns they are, but there's some gravel traps there, and they were unforgiving this week. Just like Monza, it's a really fast track, and if you put a foot wrong, you're probably going to be out of the race. And we've seen that over the last couple of years.
Now let's go on to, if we have to, I suppose. Let's go on to Sochi on the 26th of September, the Russian Grand Prix. If you want to hear us complaining in detail about this
we've got a podcast
circuit,
back in the day.
We've got an episode where we talk about tracks that we'd like to see on the calendar and tracks we want to see gone from the calendar, and understandably Sochi is one of them that we want to see gone. It's just flat and boring and lifeless, and nothing happens. It's never really produced a good race. I think everything that can be said about this lifeless circuit has been said.
Yeah, I can't be bothered to get into it again because it's just such a...
Turn 3 is great. Love
depressing
turn 3.
circuit. Yeah, that's it. That's the only decent turn on the whole track. Everything else is 90-degree left, right. Yeah. It's not what... If you really want to listen to our thoughts and feedback on it, like Alex said, there's a podcast back of what we think about the calendar and what we think should go and stay. Russia is definitely one of those ones which should go, so go check that out.
Hopefully
if you're interested.
We put a link to it up on the video somewhere.
One of us would have remembered, hopefully. And then we move on to Singapore. Another street circuit in the dark.
Yep.
longest lap on the track, I believe. I think it's one of the longest races on the track. It's got the longest lap times.
It's pretty long, isn't it? Yeah.
And what do I feel about Singapore?
It's all right. Had some good races there.
Yeah, it's all right. They've changed it over the last. It's one of the recent tracks where actually they've changed it a few times in the last 5 or 6 years. Got the it's called the Singapore Sling.
Yeah.
Where you've had a chicane there before. You've had a 90-degree left. You've had it flat out going into like the bridge section. It just every other year they'll change it, try and make it a little bit more interesting. Which I quite like a little bit of difference in the track. It makes it more like I said, just makes it more interesting. Had some good races there. It's a nice spectacle. It looks good under the night. Yeah, out of all the street circuits we go to, it's not the worst. I wouldn't say it's the best. I quite like Baku. Baku's up there as one of my favorite street circuits, and Singapore would probably be a close second.
Yeah, it's another big spectacle, like you say. There's quite a few sections of it that are quite wide for a street circuit. Again, there's some very challenging sections, but obviously the nature of it being a street circuit, you don't have any of the undulations or elevations that you get from the old school tracks. But we've had some good races there. We've also had some controversial races there. Never forget Crashgate. But yeah, I don't mind seeing Singapore, and I don't have a strong enough opinion about it to.
It's one of the hottest tracks of the year. It's one of the hottest temperatures
as well. Yeah,
which sometimes engines suffer in those temperatures, so it makes it more of a strategic game, but it doesn't affect the racing. It's just what car can last the longest. Had a problem with the tram system underneath the track a fair few years ago. It was disrupting the ERS systems in people's cars, and there was a lot of retirements. Obviously, they've stopped that now during the race, but yeah, it's an all right circuit. I quite like it. It's not the best thing in the world, but it's not the worst by any means necessary.
But we've seen this year as well how the climate conditions
can really
change the nature of it. So I think it's important to have races like that where the weather and the temperature and humidity can have an impact on the cars, like we saw in Silverstone. We're normally doing it during the summer, and so doing it during a different period of time meant that that changed the nature of the race somewhat. So.
And there's no reason why Formula One shouldn't go to the extreme temperatures. I'm not talking like 0 degrees or minus degrees.
Antarctica Grand Prix.
Yeah. But these are it's the pinnacle of racing. If you want to race in 40 degrees, then go ahead and do it. It's the driver's job to prove that they're able to do it, and it's the mechanics and it's the team's job to prove that their cars can withstand that pressure.
Right, let's go over to Japan then. So we've got Suzuka as usual on the 10th of October. This is a circuit we're very familiar with now. There's quite a few potential Japanese circuits that we could go to, but Suzuka has got some iconic elements to it. It is, of course, the only figure of 8 circuit on the calendar. It also has the infamous 130R, which is probably not quite as infamous as it used to be, but is still an exciting corner nonetheless. We've seen some great races here in the past. What do you think of Suzuka, Shane?
As a racetrack goes, it's a nice one to drive in the game. It's very flowing. You have to hook up Sector 1 on the first corner, otherwise you mess up the whole of Sector 1. So I like the commitment drivers have to have. You have to hit every single apex to really make it work. I love the fact it's a figure of 8 circuit. Love 130R and spoon, double left-hander. Got to get track. You got to get your foot down in the right place to get as much as you can going through 130R. Seeing cars
I find this track really hard on the game. I think this track's one of the hardest on the game.
I don't mind it.
It's for me anyway.
After Sector 1, I don't mind it at all. I'm just not very good at Sector 1. I quite like it. It's a good racetrack. It's a racetrack. It's an old school. It feels like an old school racetrack. I think it's all right. Yeah, nothing else to say on it.
Classic track.
Absolutely.
Then we 24th go to October. Circuit of the Americas.
What do you think about that?
It's got a lot of elements on this track that are similar to other tracks. So it has those S's that are kind of a little bit Maggots and Beckett's-esque, but not quite as good.
Yeah.
It's got that kind of fast Right. I mean, it's a Tilke track, isn't it? So it's got a
Yeah.
lot of those things that you expect about it. It's got the really long straight into a sharp corner with a big braking zone. It's got a fast, possible double apexed turn somewhere. We've got that sort of fast turn, right?
Got a really strange elevation into turn 1, which I never fully understood.
Yeah, I kind of like that though. I kind of like it's got this big hill going into the first turn.
It's a huge hill, isn't it? It's just there. Makes it interesting because as soon as you climb to the top of it, it's foot down, and you go. If it's raining, it makes it more interesting.
It's not a bad track.
No,
Again,
it's
it's another
alright.
one of those that I'm a little bit sort of. Yeah, it's okay. You know.
Always draws in like a good crowd, and that's what I like to see. I like to see like fans packed in the grandstand, something we've not seen this year at all, really. Round about this time of year, Hamilton's probably wrapped up the championship. He hasn't he won it at Austin before? I feel like he's won it at
Yeah, he
Circuits
did, yeah.
Americas.
I thought that he did last year. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's done it at Mexico before as well. So, it's at this point you've got to start considering actually what tracks we put towards the end of the calendar, because it might be the spectacle where we get a world champion or a constructors world champion. You never know. But
You
I
can always
quite like
rely
it.
on the Americans for spectacle.
They did that strange introduction one time, didn't they? When it was almost like a football game, and they were coming out of like a tunnel with the drivers.
Oh yeah,
It was I don't know what to make of that. I don't even want to think about it again. They
it's fine.
scrapped it.
It's the US Grand Prix. They can do it their way. It's fine. It's
They
fun.
stopped it the year after. But they obviously have a good music festival afterwards as well, which is understandable because it's a huge event out there, and it's good to see obviously competing with other motorsport events. It's got such a crowd out there as well. So that's Circuits of America. Going on to the 31st of October, we've got Mexico City, the highest altitude Grand Prix ever. It's got one of the longest straights ever in a Formula One race, and we start seeing some huge speeds, don't we? Like turn 1, cars are approaching 210 plus miles per hour, which is a crazy number when you think they're going into a 90-degree right-hander. But apart from that, I never really found it a brilliant circuit. I've never really enjoyed racing it. I don't know what the drivers think about it. It's hard because there's no they struggle with downforce up there. They do, don't they? They run like Monaco downforce levels because they're so high up.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting circuit. Not one I would miss, probably because it's only been on the calendar for like 4 or 5 years, or maybe less. Maybe we just need to have that one fantastic race there, and everyone will remember, like, yes, this is why we want the Mexican Grand Prix. But at the moment, I can't remember that happening. Even when Lewis won his world championship at Mexico, him and Vettel shared a moment on, they have sorry, I'm just going off on tangent here, but they have a weird podium as well, don't they? It's not on the pit straight; it's in the stadium section.
And
it's all right.
They lifted him up in his
Oh
car,
my
didn't they?
goodness! Yeah, was it
That was
Kimi on
pretty
the
cool.
podium? Was it Kimi on the podium though? When there was a DJ behind him starting to like play music,
Oh, yeah.
and he just chugged the champagne. I thought, blimey! Out of everyone you want on the podium who would appreciate that, it is not Kimi Räikkönen. Back to the topic in hand. What do you think about the Mexican Grand Prix?
Yeah, I feel very similar to you that it's got a couple of cool elements, the ones that you mentioned, and the stadium section is it's kind of interesting to look at, but don't really have no memories really stick out as to the racing. Big straight, fast speeds.
Low
The only thing that
downforce.
comes to mind is when Bottas stuck it in the barriers that one time.
Oh, what, the tech flow ones?
Yeah,
That's the only thing which comes
I
to mind.
really
then
remember.
It's probably a race
Because he
probably
was
a
like
track
breathing
to
quite
forget.
heavily because of the thin air and everything. So,
Yeah, true.
but as a race, nothing really comes to mind. I don't dislike it. I haven't seen it enough times because it's a relatively new circuit.
Yeah, exactly that. Maybe we just need that one fantastic race. Because remember Baku, the first time we raced there, it was like, well, that was a little bit underwhelming. And then the second time we raced there, we had the Hamilton and Vettel situation. We had obviously Daniel and Max situation and all this overtaking, and Lance
Stroll
ended up on the podium. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, Stroll on the podium. And everyone was like, this is the best track ever. Well done, Baku. I was like, hold on a second. 12 months ago, you said this was an awful track. So maybe we're just holding out for that fantastic race.
Are you trying to suggest, Shane, that people, perform histrionics in order to make their opinion seem more valid?
I dare not comment. I'm going to withhold comment on that one before I upset anyone. I'm probably a bit subject to it, to be honest. Like, Baku was a prime instance. I remember watching it in 2016 or 2017 thinking, oh, that was all right. But it was only until next year I was like, well, actually, this does have now the potential. We know it's got the potential to throw up a fantastic race. We just need drivers to hit each other. No, I'm joking. Moving on from Mexico, because it's, yeah. If you've got anything else to say on Mexico, I'm pretty much done.
Yeah, now let's go to Brazil.
Brazil's an interesting one because actually we've had some fantastic races there. We've had some fantastic weather there. We've had championships decided there. We've had garages trashed. We've had hearts broken. Championships won. It's been incredible. That circuit has got so much history. Why
and
it's
the
not the
atmosphere
last
as well.
It's just incredible. Absolutely amazing. In my
Mexico's
opinion,
the same, actually, to be fair. Just looking back a little bit at Mexico, like similarly, the South
fans.
American fans, they love it. They absolutely love it.
It's probably why they're next to each other on the calendar, but it's, in my opinion, Brazil should be the last race on the track.
Yeah.
Because of the history, because of like, it's the championships it's decided in the past. But if you think about everything we've summarized in the last 19 races, in the last 20 races, about wide tracks are better, no heavy braking zones, tracks which are too thin, don't promote overtaking. Actually, Brazil is a really thin track. Like the majority of it, apart from, the first sector and that last corner, it's a really thin track. But it still seems like one of the best. It's hard to put into words. It is very short. It's a very quick lap time, and some drivers get lapped many a times. And that's almost part of the spectacle, actually, trying to get past. That's when your overtaking comes on, when they're trying to get past lap drivers. But I really like Brazil. I love the history. We've had some fantastic races there. The weather always throws up something. And I hope it stays. I know sometimes it won't be the most interesting race on the calendar, but I really like it.
Yeah, Interlagos is a classic circuit. Like you say, it is quite narrow in places, but there's also some very challenging sections into possible overtaking areas. Like you have the Senna S's into the main straight, which has a DRS. You've got the big curve coming out into the main straight itself at the end. It's quite a challenging circuit in the way that it goes up and down quite a lot. Some impressive spectacles, impressive views. But there is obviously some controversy surrounding this race as well, because they were talking about holding it in a new venue in Rio and signing this new contract. And this new Rio track requires some kind of environmental approval, as it involves felling a bunch of rainforest, basically.
Yeah.
I don't see why that's necessary when Interlagos is such a good circuit.
I think it's actually, I would have thought that there's probably now.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I know that Hamilton spoke out about it, and hopefully, I dare say that there's some kind of political, financial justification behind it that somebody's making. But as far as racing is concerned, Interlagos, like you already mentioned, the history, the quality of the racing, there's no reason to replace it, and especially not felling a bunch of rainforest for it either.
No, it's a perfectly good track.
Hopefully, we stay there. There's nothing wrong with that circuit. Let's just keep it.
It's not like the circuit needs a £10 million investment to keep it going, to make it compatible for modern F1 cars, to keep it relevant. It's a good circuit. It's in good condition. There's no need to spend. It's just like you said. There's no need to spend millions of pounds and commit deforestation and destroy the environment for a new race circuit which has got no proven history at all. When you've got a brilliant circuit a couple of miles down the road. So Brazil's a stay. Absolutely love Interlagos.
Now we come on to the more sort of controversial addition to the calendar. So we're going to Saudi Arabia in 2021 to Jeddah. I don't think we really know anything about the circuit yet, do we?
I've not seen anything. I've seen, obviously, the fact that we're going there and it's been confirmed, but I've seen the issues surrounding it as well.
But I don't think we know anything about the circuit itself.
No.
So we can't really speak to that. As for the controversy surrounding it, I think the long and short of it for me is that it's a good thing that we race there, provided that at least some of the teams and drivers are prepared to speak out in denouncement of the practices of the Saudi regime I can't imagine Hamilton staying silent. And as long as Formula One are honest and consistent in their commitment to ensuring that they do not become complicit in any of the potential abuses or exploitation as part of the event, do I think that racing there suddenly makes Saudi Arabia okay when it comes to human rights abuses or anything? Of course not. Do I think we should boycott the race though? I don't know. I'm not really sure what that will do. I'm not sure what the effect of that will be. They signed this 10-year deal, haven't they? So
wow,
that's already happened. It's already taken place.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult conversation. I don't really want to get too mired into it because I'm not qualified to talk about human rights abuses on an international level. What it does seem to me though is that if we want to complain about that, we will have to find ourselves complaining about human rights abuses all over the world, because it's not like Saudi Arabia is the only country that F1 visits that has those kind of problems. Then do we set some kind of threshold at which we say the problems in this country are okay and the problems in this country are not okay? And is F1 really capable of being the arbiter of moral certainty across the world? I really don't think so.
No.
So it's a very difficult thing to talk about. I'm not really sure that I can deliver a certain opinion on this, but it seems to me that provided that people don't stay silent and that Formula One is able to be consistent in their commitments, then we'll see. Let's see if it produces a good race first and not try and convince ourselves that Formula One can solve the world's ills.
You know what? I looked at this track and I thought, how am I going to summarize how I feel about this, given that we have no information on the track itself? But what you've done is you've summarized perfectly what I wanted to say. We don't know the track layout, and this podcast was talking about whether we like the track layout and whether it produced good racing. What you touched on was a very important point, and I feel like I'm just going to reiterate what you said. As long as Formula One doesn't suppress drivers by speaking out what they feel like is right, then there's no reason why we can't go there. The contract's already signed, so we're going there.
Yeah.
If drivers want to speak out and start working towards a better community, start working towards different policies and politics, then that's absolutely fine. The Black Lives Matter thing has had a huge impact across the world, and Hamilton's done a fantastic job with that. He was crowned world champion 2 days ago. Was it yesterday? Yeah, was crowned world champion yesterday, and he was wearing Black Lives Matter, and I think that's fantastic. It's good that the driver can speak out and that Formula One are not suppressing that. They're not in a position to do so. So as long as they support the drivers in what they want to say, we've signed the contract, might as well go there. Hopefully it's a good racetrack. When we do get to see the racetrack, and I'm sure we'll do a quick RPM roundup on what it looks like and what corners look like they'll be interesting. Like we have done on, Zandvoort. We've only seen pictures of it, so there's not much we can talk about that either. But that's it for Saudi Arabia. Moving on to the final race of the calendar, 5th of December. It's a long old season, isn't it? It spans over 9 months. Even though the 3 months we don't race feels like such a long time. In fact, it's only, it's 12 weeks. It feels like nothing. But the 5th of December, we go to Abu Dhabi, and we've got the final Grand Prix. I quite like this one. And not the track itself. Okay, so let me start that again. I like the setting it's set in. I like how we go from day to night. I think that's fantastic. Love the venue. I think it's clean. It's crisp. It's not too. It's obviously got alternative layouts, but it's not crazy like the Paul Ricard. So it looks really good from the helicopter cam. Really like Sector 1 and Sector 2. Not a massive fan of Sector 3. Sector 3 is very reminds me of Hungary. Sector 3 is very street-esque. Even though it's a little bit wider, it still doesn't promote very much overtaking. I don't mind the race. I think it's all right. I just don't think it should be the last race we go to. It doesn't have that great history. It doesn't have that guaranteed this is going to be an amazing event to finish a Formula One season on. If it was happening, honestly think, if it happened during the day and we finish under the sun, we wouldn't be racing there for the final race because it just wouldn't look as good. The lights of the hotels, the fireworks, the fire, the streamers, it wouldn't look as good in the daylight. So I think one of the main reasons it's the last track on the calendar is because it does have that utterly amazing transition from day to night. And it looks stunning. And it provides okay racing. What's your thoughts on it?
I certainly agree that it's a great spectacle. It looks fantastic. The facility wise, it's outstanding. I really like the pit exit that goes underneath the track and comes out again.
Yeah.
It's not really necessary at all, but they just did it because they could. So
It sounds great as well when you on board
it's
with the
kinda
car
cool,
and you
I
can hear
guess,
them.
like. So yeah, I like that. Racing wise, Sector 3 is utterly pointless. I don't even know why it's even there. It's an absolute nothing of a track at that point.
It just slows the cars down and puts them into single file.
Yeah, it's just that bit's completely worthless. If they got rid of that and maybe just had a slightly more interesting way of closing up the circuit, it could be all right. Yeah, it's not awful for racing, but it's not really that great either. And to echo your point that it has no place being the last track on the calendar because it's just no matter how fancy it looks, it always feels anticlimactic, and it always just seems that it's not really appropriate to have there. And yeah, I don't really hate the track, but I wouldn't miss it if it were gone.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think it sounds like I like it a little bit more than you do, but that's probably probably the first circuit we disagree on ever so slightly. But we agree with that it looks amazing due to the transition of the day to night, and the venue itself is stunning. That's without a doubt. It's there because it's quite a wealthy part of the country as well. Like it's all the rich and famous go there to celebrate the last race. They put themselves up in the nice hotel. It's got Ferrari World next to it, so it looks good. Doesn't provide the best of racing. My favorite moment was Hamilton driving 6 or 7 seconds slower a lap, trying to back, I think, second place driver into Nico, and it was just that was quite entertaining. I'm trying to win a championship here. You tried. Luck wasn't on your favour that year, my mate. But yeah, that's all I've got to say about Dubai. It's an all right. It just doesn't deserve to be at the end of the calendar. At the end of a huge calendar, we touch on that for a little bit. 23 races provisionally booked in for next year. There's 52 weeks in a year, and obviously this is just under half the year. Half the year's weekends will be racing. Now that might be great for us as fans, but you've got to think about, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. We've got to talk about the impact it's going to have on teams, drivers, families, friends, relationships. It's been tough this year, and a lot of mechanics have come out and said how tough it's been doing triple headers, and then triple headers going having a week off and then going into a double header. They're not seeing their families for 5 weeks out of 6. It's a real tough commitment, and it's getting tougher. Which is it feels a bit selfish. We've got all these races, but actually it's at a deficit to the families and friends of the drivers and and the workers of the teams. What's your thoughts on the length of the calendar, Alex?
Like you say, this is a record-breaking number of races for a season. Even if that to be announced slot isn't filled, it will still be the longest on record, as 21 was the previous longest. Now the championship is nearly triple the length that it was when Grand Prix racing first started. There are some that might argue that kind of cheapens the impact of a race and makes it less of a big event. Not sure I really agree with that, because if that were true, then people still consider football matches, for example, to be a big event. And there are, 10, 11 Premier League matches going on every week.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not sure if having more races necessarily cheapens them as events, because good racing is good racing.
It's good racing.
Always want to see more of that. So that's fine by me. But like you say, you touched on a very important point, which is that the intensity of this calendar is going to have a serious impact on the personnel for the teams. And I think that the only way to properly mitigate that is to have more 2-day races in order to accommodate for that in general. And I think it's possible. I think Imola has showed us that it's possible. Maybe that affects some of the teams in certain ways of their performance, but so be it. I think that they've got to rethink it in order for it to be fair for the personnel, because the resources for a smaller team, it's going to be difficult for them to have. If you're a large team like Mercedes or Red Bull or whatever, you might be in a position, financially or otherwise, to have, say, different shifts of people going within the team.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whereas a team like Haas or Williams, for example, they're just not going to have the luxury of being able to do something like that.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I think the only way to make that fair is to do more 2-day races, and there are lots of Grand Prix weekends where that should be possible.
I completely agree. I think we touched on it before, how we think 2-day weekends would work better. Have a handful of them throughout the year, see how they go. I do think these issues will come to light midway through next year. It's a huge calendar, and it's got 3 triple headers, I believe, which is a massive amount. And if that's wrong, we've still got a load of double headers, and like you said, a record-breaking calendar. Even if we drop down to 22, if we get that blank slot filled at 23 races, it's massive, and that's all between March and December, and it's only 1 week into December, so actually it's not many months at all to fit those in, and that's with a 4-week break in between as well. So you've got a month off in between, so it's a heavy hitting calendar. But I'm sure these issues will present themselves going into next year. I think after the first 10 or 11 races, teams will start to feel it. They might not come out of it because obviously the nature of the team, it's all positive, everything's working well, but I'm sure there'll be someone along the line who says this is getting difficult. So who knows? But that is it. Have you got anything else to mention, Alex?
No, just that I'm looking forward to returning to something resembling normality. I suppose that's a statement that I could make about life in general right now, but certainly when it comes to Formula One, it'll be nice to return to a more familiar calendar, and looking forward to it. Always looking forward to the new season.
It's a slight shame we haven't got those odd, weird and wonderful tracks which we've had this year not return. None of them really have.
Yeah, I understand, though, why Formula One want to have a slightly more normal calendar, though. I mean, they've got agreements that they've got to honour.
Absolutely, yeah.
And financially, the Formula One has found itself in a considerable hole this year because they've basically had to forego a bunch of fees and the like in order for races to be put on at all.
I'm sure nobody's
coming to the tracks. So
exactly, well, they're not making any money this year, are they? So
no, I mean, I'm sure they'll. Yeah, like you say, I'm sure they'll make that up. They'll have no trouble making their money, but it'll be nice to have a normal, quote unquote normal season calendar back. And there's an opportunity that we might see one of these tracks return in that slot that's yet to be filled, and hopefully the races that we've had will stick in the minds of the people organising those races, and maybe we'll see them again in the future. I certainly hope so.
I hope so too.
That's our deep dive into all of the races on the calendar next year then. Thanks very much for joining us. If you like what you heard, then you can subscribe to us on YouTube and leave a comment down below, like the video, all those usual things. And if you're listening to us on your podcast provider, then we'd really like it if you gave us a rating, and a review really helps us out. You can get in contact with us on Twitter at RacePerMinute. You can send us any questions or comments on there, find out the latest news, etc. And you can email us at info@raceperminute.com. We'd really like it if people would send us audio or video messages and comments that we can play and react to on the show. So if you want to do that, emailing is your best bet, but you can also send them on Twitter as well, so at RacePerMinute. And lastly, if you really like what we do, then the best way to support us is to visit our Patreon, patreon.com/RacePerMinute, where for as little as £1 a month, you can gain benefits such as joining our Discord, where you can watch the races with us, and we'll also give you monthly shout-outs and merchandise and all those usual things as you go up the tiers. Check it out, patreon.com/RacePerMinute. Thanks very much for joining us once again. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.